Before I went to Japan for 40 days, I thought I knew what to expect. Like every kid in Southeast Asia, Japanese media has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I spent the earliest years of my childhood watching shows like Ultraman, Kamen Rider, replaced that with anime once I got a little bit older. Point is, I've consumed so much Japanese content for so long that I even learned the language, so I thought I had a pretty good idea of what Japan was actually like before I went. But I still got hit with some surprises. There are some things that are more subtle that you only learn about by actually being in Japan, and today I'm going to be sharing some of those things with you. So without further ado, let's get into it. Maybe this first thing isn't really that subtle, but I was still somehow not prepared for how much Japanese people take hospitality to the extreme. Every action is deliberately made to be as non-imposing as possible. It's kind of standard for waiters to not approach your table unless you call for them, because they don't want to interrupt your conversation or invade your privacy. And in some places, when they do come, they even kneel by the table to make themselves feel smaller. I guess the logic here is that you don't have to look up at them, so that way it feels less imposing. Almost every working woman I've seen below the age of 50 goes out of their way to put on the softest demeanor possible. Like, sometimes I'll even get women who are clearly in their 30s and 40s talking to me with the voice of a 12-year-old girl, which isn't really a big deal at all, but it's just something that I can never get used to. What surprised me even more is that a lot of men working in hospitality do this as well. And as a server myself, like I've been waiting on tables since I was 16, I understand wanting to be as approachable as possible for your customers, but intentionally speaking in a high-pitched voice is just something that I wouldn't even think about doing. Besides that, they'll also do whatever it takes to convey the most respect possible, even if it seems very excessive. Every time I was leaving a restaurant, the staff would say thank you to me like 3 to 4 different times, and most of the time they'd even do a deep bow to send me off. And this also happened to me as well when I checked out of some fancier hotels. I had heard about this before, but I always just brush it off as some kind of hype or exaggeration. But no, Japanese people are really like that when it comes to hospitality. Even train conductors bow when they move between different train cars, so stuff like this isn't limited to hospitality either. Even though it's definitely not as extreme outside of hospitality-related work, you'll see that most Japanese people also behave the same way in everyday life. As in, they'll suppress themselves in any way they can to maximize convenience for others. So a couple of examples. If you're blocking their way and they want to move past you, instead of bothering you with anything verbal like an "excuse me," they'll just hold up their hand in whichever direction they want to go, and they'll do a slight bow like this, and they just hope that you'll notice them. If not, they'll just brush past you. If they sit next to you or get into an elevator with you, they'll pretty much always do a slight bow as if they're apologizing for entering your space. On the subway, and especially on longer distance trains like the Shinkansen, people turn off the volume on their phones, they don't talk on the phone, and even when they're with friends, they try their best to keep it down. Students in big groups might be rowdy sometimes, but that's just normal. I never had train rides so peaceful in my life. Like 90% of the time, I was just sitting in complete and utter silence, which definitely felt like salvation after years of riding the circus that we call the New York subway. You can definitely see how this mindset is built into the language as well, because I've lost count of how many times I've heard phrases like 失礼します, お待たせしました, 申し訳ありません, お邪魔します. Like, Japanese people apologize for so many trivial things in everyday life, and it just feels like they're conditioned to kind of see themselves as an inconvenience and as a burden to everyone else by default. This way of thinking also exists in other East and Southeast Asian countries as well. I personally embody this a lot because my family drilled it into me, but Japan really takes this to a whole other level. I've asked some of the Japanese people I've met whether or not they get tired of having to do this all the time, but basically what I've been told is that these are all just examples of bitoku, which is the virtue of being modest and humble. So therefore, it's not really a big deal to them at all, and it's something that they're proud of doing. At least that's how I understood it. Because of this kind of behavior, many people around the world have this perception that East and Southeast Asians are submissive and obedient, and from an American perspective, I can kind of see why. But at the end of the day, it simply boils down to a difference in values. Nothing more, nothing less. In most parts of the world, being assertive is probably one of the most respectable qualities that you can have. Meanwhile, in places like Japan, being agreeable and mindful to a fault is what people value more. Honestly, I think that many Japanese behaviors are things that the rest of the world needs more of because I get exposed to so many inconsiderate people living in the US and even in Europe, and I'm sick of it. I got whiplash on my flight back to France because as soon as I got on the plane, everyone around me was already complaining and being passive-aggressive to each other in French. And I was like, yep, this is what I'm coming back to. There has to be a balance though, because this is also the same reason why so many Japanese people accept working unpaid overtime and getting yelled at by their managers as a normal occurrence. Like, no country is perfect, but we should definitely try to learn from the best things that each country has to offer. Speaking of unpaid overtime, let me just go on a little tangent here because every younger Japanese person I spoke to complained about the corporate work culture, getting treated like shit at these so-called black companies and whatnot. Yet none of them are really doing anything to change this because none of them really care much or even know much about politics, if at all. That's how in this day and age, in 2025, you still manage to end up with prime ministers like Takaichi, someone who brags about only needing 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night, someone who holds meetings at 3 a.m. in the morning, and someone who's trying to increase the number of allowable working hours instead of reducing them, even though everyone already knows at this point that this is by far and away the #1 cause of mental health issues and collapsing birth rates in Japan. By the way, Takaichi gets painted as a Japanese female version of Trump a lot in Western media, and just out of curiosity, I decided to ask as many Japanese people as I could whether or not this was actually the case. Funny thing is, except for one 34-year-old guy I met in Takayama, pretty much everyone else either saw her as someone that just wants to protect Japan from getting overrun by misbehaving foreigners, or they just had no opinion at all. If young Japanese people actually cared enough about politics to look beyond the campaign ads and the short clips that they see on social media and actually went out to vote, Japan might have been heading in a very different direction today. Over in the US and Europe, voting is considered one of your most important responsibilities as a citizen, and many people will make you feel guilty for not at least having an opinion on politics. Meanwhile, in Japan, all you have to say is, "Kyomi nai," I'm not interested, and that's it. No justification needed, no one's gonna ask you more about it, yeah. Political awareness in the US keeps getting younger and younger, so it was just very striking for me to kind of see the opposite happen in Japan. Young Japanese people just seem incredibly passive about things that actually matter, like politics. They just don't care. And that's one of my biggest culture shocks from an American perspective. I walked past a protest for Palestine when I was visiting Sendai, and even they were all old people, which is crazy when you consider that this movement is dominated by younger people pretty much everywhere else across the world. By the way, if you're heading to Japan soon and you're wondering what to do for internet access, I personally used an Airalo eSIM while traveling around the country for 40 days, and I never had any issues with coverage or speed. If you want to get yourself one, please feel free to use my link below. It helps support the channel at no extra cost to you. Alright, let's get back into it. Ending on a more positive note, one thing that'll always leave me in awe about Japan is the insane level of social trust. And I'm just gonna try to give you as many examples as I can. So the first hotel I stayed at in Asakusa had a 24-hour self-service food and drink station. So you had a bunch of different snacks, rice balls, bread, soft drinks, coffee, even alcohol all out in the open. You get whatever you need, and to pay for it, you go up to the payment terminal and you manually select each item that you took. There's no staff watching you, no sensors, no gates, no controls of any kind to make sure that you are paying for what you actually took. They literally trust every single guest to pay honestly, which is crazy when you consider that most people staying there are foreigners who might not have been brought up to operate with that level of honesty. I've lived in the US and France, and you just can't trust people with self-checkout in those kinds of places. Dude, theft is getting so bad in France that you have security guards not just at the self-checkout, but also hovering behind the cashiers. If you walk in with a backpack, the cashiers will always ask you to open it up before they start scanning your groceries. Other than a few high-end jewelry stores in Osaka, I didn't see any security guards anywhere. Second example. Shrines and temples all across Japan have these coin boxes where you drop 100 yen coins in to pay for stuff like omikuji, ema, and even for rituals like yakuwari, where you throw plates at a special stone to symbolize breaking or misfortune. Fun stuff. The point I'm trying to make here is that, again, no one really checks whether or not you're paying what you're supposed to. I get that people are way less likely to be dishonest at a sacred place, but considering how many tourists Japan gets and how badly a lot of these tourists behave, I think that this amount of trust still means a lot. Something that also surprised me a lot was the concept of umbrella sharing, where you have these stands with umbrellas outside of places like train stations that anyone could just borrow whenever it rains. You don't need to register or write anything down, and when you're done using these umbrellas, you can just return them either to the same stand you took it from or to a different stand somewhere else that's covered by the same service. I don't think this is a thing in most cities in Japan, but the fact that it does exist in some places, especially for practical stuff like umbrellas, is already very impressive to me. One last special example I have is from this place that I stayed at next to a Buddhist temple up high in the mountains. They had a collection of 18 kimonos that were over 2 million yen each, and any female guest could just ask to try them on for a small fee. So you pick the one you like, the staff helps you get into it, they take pictures for you, they even give you all the private time you want, and there's zero fuss, which is crazy because again, these are 2 million yen dresses. If I were trying on a $12,000 outfit in the US, for example, they definitely wouldn't leave me alone and out of sight for 15 minutes. Just saying. So those were the 3 biggest cultural observations I was able to make on this 40-day trip to Japan. And on the slight chance that I'm talking out my ass, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. I took a long break, but I'm definitely gonna get back to uploading quite frequently, so stay tuned for my future videos. And until next time, have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye now.